Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of JaianMusic Notes. Very excited about today's episode. We have a guest who is bigger than ever as a fan of this series, of this animated series for Zelda. Yes, we're talking about Zelda on an anime music podcast. There is a Zelda anime, I guess, out there, and that's good enough for me to talk about Zelda anytime. So joining us today is Matty Perrier. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, man.
For sure. Extremely excited to start this conversation about the music in this incredibly cringe series of Zelda. I'll say right away, my feelings will be known. But the music's great. The music's good.
Of course.
That's what we're gonna
yeah. And I will say, for the record, I am a fan of Zelda. I'm not necessarily a fan of this show. I wasn't even made aware of it. It came out before I was born. And so I watched a few episodes, and it's, definitely a product of its time, but definitely has some very redeeming qualities to it as well.
Yeah, and to be specific here, we're talking about Zelda that came out, what year did this series
I think it was 1989.
1989 Zelda is what we're talking about. This is probably the oldest anime I've spoken about yet. So this is a new record in JaianMusic Notes history.
Wow.
But before we get into all that, Matt, please tell us about yourself. You do a lot of music, you're very audio focused, and you're a big fan of Zelda, so this was the perfect episode to have you on. But give us a little overview about your love life with the music in Zelda.
Yeah, of course. So I am a musician, multi-instrumentalist, music producer here in Montreal as well, and I kind of live and breathe audio and music and all that I do for work and for fun. And then when I'm not too busy getting immersed in those worlds, playing a lot of video games, and Zelda's one of my top franchises of all time.
Of course.
And that's, I don't know. It's just been around since I've been a kid, and has sort of carried with me into my adult years, and even in my waning free time, I'm just so happy to pick up my Switch and play the new generation of Zelda games too. So big fan of both those worlds. So yeah, you're right. Having them both come together through this really weird dated TV show is kind of a nice surprise to be exposed to.
Yeah, of course. I think that the conception of this episode was oh, you're really talented in music, you understand music really well, so what's a series we could get behind? And Zelda kind of came to mind. I was but that's that's not Japanese anime. And then I kind of looked into it. I found this animated series, which, it's Zelda, it's something. So, if you're not an anime music, if you're an anime music fan, that's 100%, take this as your one-off episode of the podcast here. But the music here, this show it's super campy humor, very woohoo. The music kind of reflects that. And I guess before we get into all of that, I should do what I do at the start of every episode. The sponsor of this podcast is Laser Audio Technologies. They are an amazing plugin company founded by my friend, and they have great creative effects plugins such as Fram and Glow. And if you use code JaianMusic at checkout, you get 25% off your purchase, and all the money generated from that code goes straight back into the podcast, such as GoPro Kyo, who does all of the artwork. All right, first thing I want to say about this, Matt, is the amount of, because I play a lot of the Zelda games as well, on NES. I'm a big fan of the Legend of Zelda and everything, but they have a lot of the renditions of the original Zelda games and everything reorchestrated into this animated series, which kind of makes sense but caught me off guard, because I was oh, that's that melody and that's that melody. How did you feel about just the music, the aesthetic of the music? And let's remember it came out in 1989.
Yeah, but I was a big fan of, actually my favorite part about the show is the music and all the different things it was doing within the show as sort of background, supporting atmosphere. But one thing that I thought about as well is, it's a lot of orchestral reimaginings of the original theme. But you have to think back, the show came out in the late 80s, and before that we just had NES technology, and it was all 8-bit video game music. I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, but I think this TV show was the first time that video game music and the theme was able to be on another medium where actually recorded instruments could be sort of professionally done with a bigger budget and not a technological limitation. So with that sort of like context that it might have been the first instance of that being done, really makes the material in the TV show pop out in a really interesting way. Now, every modern game has got the big theme and the big symphonies playing them all, but I think this was the first time it's done, and it's it's a really solid musical score for the show as well. It didn't take him too long to knock it out of the park on the music end.
Absolutely. And I feel like, when I think of 8-bit music and everything, like I think of like how music is just made on trackers, and on how like you have literally like 4 channels of audio. So the way you creating like polyphony with chords is not really a thing. So okay, arpeggios, lots of arpeggios. The more notes in a row, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's really cool about when you bring up the chiptune stuff is I really felt like the music here had like I just felt like I heard like chiptune textures in the strings, or just something. There was something with chiptune texture. Did you catch that?
In the instrumentals themselves, I didn't hear that so much, but I did like how, at least in terms of sort of the sound design, they did have like old school NES sounding like sound effects to, like in one of the first scenes of the show when all the moblins are invading Link's room, and like he's using his master sword to blast him away, and there's actual like video game type sound effects like that are inserted that I'm sure the sound designer and all the Foley artists like had a field day putting all that together, because there is a lot of very gimmicky, almost like slapstick kind of sound effects with every moving object that's happening in any one scene. It's a lot of that going on as well. I don't know if I noticed the chiptune stuff in the actual sort of say background music, but definitely at the forefront.
I don't know. It's just like texturally wise, I definitely felt like sawtooths. And it just had that like buzzy sharpness of a sawtooth. I don't know if like maybe like one of the fundamentals was there, and it was just and it just gave me that impression. But like I really like how they adapted those like chiptune classics into like these like orchestral small ensemble but still orchestral formats. Like what do you think about the idea of that? Like we take like these like really simple like 4 channels of audio, as I was saying before, and now here's like a string version, and here's like brass with it, and here's like an orchestral ensemble representing that classic melody, because you grew up with these songs.
Yeah. It's something that I think is really interesting to work in, especially if you make the show and the people watching it are going to be either kids watching TV or fans of the game. So if they do it by design, absolutely. As it being like an homage of knowing where you came from and what the original versions of these songs sounded like, and working it into a more to keep the familiarity of it, but also have it sound modern and grander and sort of big budget through the medium that is TV. Yeah, I think if I was watching this show as a kid and I was already a Zelda fan and playing, Legend of Zelda on the NES, I think it would have been like a really, really cool tie-in, and would have just made me love the series even more than I do now.
Absolutely. And I guess where I would go next is asking like when there was like a little few action sequences here in the beginning, like I mean, I don't want to use this as an example, but I think we laughed really well about it at the beginning. The pillow fight in episode 1.
Oh yeah. There was a very sexy pillow fight happening between.
No, but like they definitely like had those like I don't want to use the pillow fight, but like the action sequences had those like sort of like orchestral flares and swells that I really liked, and I think they did a really good job of also like making the music feel extremely medieval, because like Zelda is a medieval thing. It's a medieval setting. It's swords, it's shields, it's going to the castle, and melodically they transferred that really well, considering it was adapted from a video game to like this series. So how did you feel about like how they use those different types of music for like action sequences, and like adapted also in a medieval sense? Do you see what I mean? Because they kind of combine both in a really nice way.
Yeah, I like it too. There are a lot of these like wide shots of sort of Hyrule Castle, and obviously it's a medieval setting, courtyard shots and things like that, and the theme is present throughout like a lot of every episode of this show that I've seen. At least I'd say like 60% of the music is just a rendition of the main Zelda theme and other songs that are in the game, but mainly the main theme. But obviously, on an opening shot, wide shot of the castle, it'll be like a more subtle version of the motif of the theme, but it'll be more lyres and harpsichord and things that are like instruments from that era. And then obviously when the action sequences there's a bit more bombardment and the horns and some strings and stuff like that. So it adds a lot to the dynamic pacing of the story as well, and the different action scenes or dialogue. Even the music will take a backseat to when people are talking. It plays around with the dynamics of the same song very well.
Absolutely. What are some of like Zelda songs that really stood out to you? Like maybe like not even that they don't even have to be in this series, but like what are some Zelda songs that you really enjoyed like growing up or as of late? Because I feel like we could talk about the music in this series all day, but it's still like a very short series, and these episodes were only like 15 minutes. So there's only so much to say. 13 episodes, 15 minutes. The whole thing's 14 gigs on our Internet Archive, people. I don't want to stretch stretching
it's like
here.
13, 15-minute episodes, in the time that this podcast is, going on, you could watch half the series yourself. But there's so much to talk about, like Zelda music in general. I will say, I think the main Zelda theme is one of my favorite themes of all time in any, video game show, movie. I think it's just like what it does melodically is so interesting. It bounces around all these different modes, and it kind of plays with expectations as well. Like even starting from the first two notes, it's got this very like grandiose sort of fanfare-ish thing. And I actually do think that the main theme borrows a lot from John Williams's Star Wars theme. There's kind of like a 10-second orchestra fanfare thing, and then like a soaring horn line comes in, and especially with the John Williams theme, it kind of has this big commanding. It's very common actually in a lot of these big grandiose sort of themes, orchestra themes, but it's like this the perfect fifth interval. You'll have like a single horn or string or something do that sort of like step, and it's kind of like hits it brings you to the high note quickly and then kind of melodically plays around that, and that's what the Star Wars theme does. But what I like about the Zelda theme is it still does the fifth interval, but it goes down the octave, so it kind of subverts expectations a little bit, and then it keeps dancing up the scale, and the note gets higher and higher, da 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 da, and you don't know like where's gonna be the high note. It's a little bit more emotionally manipulative in a way that I really enjoy. But it's not like a straight major or straight minor. There's variations of certain runs that are happening in different modes. It sprinkles in a lot of notes that otherwise wouldn't be in the scale. So I think it's very melodically interesting in that sense. And on that same note as well, a big Zelda song that I'm a fan of, what is it called? The Great Fairy Fountain, or the sort of twinkly piano, like. Oh
my gosh, I love that song. I'm so glad that you brought it up. Like, isn't it Great Fairy Fountain?
It's something like that. I don't know what the pieces of
Great
music.
Fairy Fountain.
Okay, yeah, it's great. I'm glad I got that one right, because you play these games and you don't know the names of actual songs, just like, oh, it's the song that plays when I go into the fairy fountain. But I love that one as well. It's a very great sort of solo piano piece, but it does the same thing. Like, it's not just minor. It's got some like notes that are outside of the key, but it kind of brings out something a little bit emotional. It gets happier and then it gets sad, but it's all equally beautiful the whole way through. It's one of those songs I've been meaning to learn on piano, but I'm like a pianist fourth, so it's been a bit daunting. But I would love to learn that and kind of study the theory behind it, because it's definitely playing into a couple different modes there as well, as does the main theme too.
I absolutely I'm so glad you brought up Fairy Fountain, a Great Fairy Fountain. I forgot that song. I literally forgot that song.
That's what I'm here for, man.
You're here for it, and that's what the whole point of this episode is. But like, what I really like about Great Fairy Fountain is like, I feel like the second you mentioned it, it like popped back in my mind exactly. I hear it in my head, and I covered that song back in 2022.
Oh,
I
nice.
believe I dropped it in 2022. Yeah, and like a lot of people streamed it like from all over the world, and I really like. It was like a thing where I was like, oh, I'm gonna do like 6 anime song covers, and I'll do like a one video games cover, you know, because I want to do the anime music thing, but like I like delving in video games here and there so often. And then this song, I remember when it came out in 2022. For some reason, in 2023, it was my most streamed song released in 2023.
Oh wow, okay,
yeah, and I was like. The Zelda fans are out here for it. Like some people, that's how much you have to love the series. If you're like, oh, okay, I heard the original 20 million times. Let me find a cover. Because I want more of this. Like, I want to see what other people feel about this song and think about this song. But it's got that really nice twinkle and like just a juxtaposition where it plays just like in this gamut where it's like it's sprinkling across different keys and different like literal piano keys is what I mean, not like actual keys of music. Right. And it's got such a nice high register, and it just feels very like levitating to me, and just like emotionally, like you said, like you go from happy to sad, and I understand why it belongs to the fairy fountain, because this song makes you feel like you're in a fairy fountain right away. So happy you brought that up, because like such a great song.
Yeah. And since we're on the topic of Zelda music, I think I have to shout out my other like standout favorite is the Gerudo Valley theme. The sort of like,
oh my God,
the Spanish inspired guitars, and you know, again, just totally, yeah. But just introducing a whole new set of instrumentation to
a new sonic palette.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And again, it takes a unique key. The notes that are in that are pretty unique, and but yeah, it's just like very iconic, very hooky. The instrumentation of it all. Yeah, it's just like, you know, even if you don't know video game songs by their name, you could say, oh, you know, the Spanish guitar song in Zelda, and most casual fans
Everyone knows.
will know.
I already know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
So, yeah, wanna throw that one in there as well, since we're on the topic.
Absolutely. I was looking more into like instruments that like were used, and like I only like sprinkled across. I mean, sorry, I'm still in Great Fairy Fountain mode.
Yeah.
I sprinkled across these Zelda episodes on. And by the way, I want to say it again. Like Internet Archive like has all these episodes. Like go watch them. And I really didn't find more instruments that like blew my mind outside of like the classical orchestral, like here's the brass, here's the strings. Was there anything particular about specifically the instrumentation? Because I kind of already talked about like how it felt medieval, and it did that well, and it supported the story, and it's dynamic. Like that's all like checkbox things here that I agree with. But like I just feel like instrumentally it didn't go crazy. A little bit of flute. Here's the odd harp, and like it gives you like that mystical medieval feeling. But was there anything in the instrumentation outside of what we already discussed that like hooked you, that you found interesting about like how they put the small ensemble together?
I wouldn't say so, but also like I was actively listening to the music of this show, but it never really is front and center, even during like the main theme song. TV shows have to bring this back, by the way, but even in the main theme, like there's kind of all of your exposition, like the plot is sort of kind of explained as the theme song is going on, and you're seeing
voiceover, sound effects, like
but every time music is playing, like it's when characters are either having conversations, or you know, Link is fighting an enemy with Zelda, or like it's a you know, kids cartoon. There's still like a lot of zany things happening, and even like the voice acting is very over the top too. So I find oftentimes,
oh my God, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, the voice acting I can't really do. But yeah, all that to say that that's what is taking the attention away. And so it almost, I mean, in terms of instrumentation, like it fits, but nothing really stands out and blows my mind, because that's not what the music is there to do. You don't want to have some crazy riffing or weird, quirky instruments while, you know, Ganon is out there sounding like a literal I don't. God, I don't know why the voice actor for Ganon. That sounds like a squirmy, squeaky little slimy. I know, nasally little lizard. I guess he's technically a pig.
Welcome back to JaianMusic Notes. I'm your host, Ganon.
So anyway, as much as I do wish the music could drown out Ganon's voice actor on the show, we're forced to listen to him front and center.
Whenever Ganon speaks, orchestral swell, please. In a one, two, three.
So yeah, and I mean, like I said, I'd say more than 50% of all the music in this show is just a variation of the theme, and it's it's a motif that we're all used to. I think it does amazing things melodically, but it's not shaking up any preconceived notions of what's happening. It fits atmospheres really well, but music doesn't technically change all that often either.
No, I agree. I still feel like there's musical placement was well done here, where we talk about action sequences or fights or everything like that, or when something humorous happens, the music reflects the character's sentiment really well. That's done really well, I find. Whenever we're having a da 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 moment, the music kind of feels like it's supporting the character in that motif,
I mean,
so I was
depends. I mean, character sentiment is interesting because I find a lot of the characters are sort of one-dimensional. Obviously, Ganon just wants the Triforce of Wisdom, and that's his only motivator. Like I said, I saw the first 4 episodes. At least Link is a little bit more diversified. He's got 2 motivations. It's bashing stuff with the sword and just trying to win over Princess Zelda. He's actually, I don't know. He's a little scummy in the first couple episodes. He's whistling at her wow, you look great from up here. I don't know. He's just being a total perv, and he's not a likable hero. He's complaining about being stuck in his castle. Oh, I used to travel Hyrule and fight enemies. Now I'm living in this castle. La-di-da. I'm man, you're making
that's
it.
The opening.
You're making
that's the opening.
Your first exposure to a talking Link. I think maybe ever. Obviously, doesn't talk in the games now. Didn't talk in the games in the 80s. But that's kind of your first introduction to him as a character, and it's you're making it hard for me to root for you, man. So sentiments are a little all over the place, but I find but at least I do like Zelda's character. She is a strong sort of female lead. She kicks as much ass as Link does. And I think the music follows that character pretty well too.
Absolutely. What about when it comes to, I guess, symphonically speaking, the music is really well orchestrated and placed in moments in pockets where it supports the character and everything. But why? And as far as my research shows, and maybe the answer is because 1989, but why isn't there a music release of an album of this series? That would be really cool in my opinion.
It would. I don't know if that's what TV shows did with their music, I mean,
but in anime, bro, as an anime music podcaster, I guess that's what I would call myself. I could go on playlists of songs. What I typically do for these guest episodes, I'll be here's a Google document, here's a Discord link, here's a playlist of the music. I couldn't do that for this
you send me an Internet Archive link, and you're oh, you don't need to watch the show, it's fine. But I'm watching the show.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? There was no way to access just the soundtrack. And the soundtrack, as much as it's great, and as much as it incorporates those Zelda classic songs, the title theme and all of that, it's crushed in narration, sound design, which we can talk about the sound design a little bit in a second here. I just felt let down, I guess, because I couldn't find the soundtrack available online, or am I expecting too much? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was hoping to find it as well, but I think that might just be a product of TV shows from that area, especially American ones, because it is an American-made TV show of a Japanese IP. Yeah. But I just don't know if kids' cartoons had used music for anything other than the purpose of the show. So I don't know if those tracks, those versions of it sort of got lost with time. And obviously now it's kind of a forgotten piece of media, so there's not like a demand to release the official soundtrack for the show. It would have been nice for sure, but I think because the music is there to fit the visual and the show, it could definitely work as a standalone thing, but they're all sort of reorchestrations of existing songs in the games or that you could find, on streaming anyway. But yeah, it would have been nice, but I also don't expect, short-lived TV shows from that many decades ago to just have readily available music only sort of soundtracks.
I do. I'm sorry. I do. I want that. Like,
we'll write them a nicely worded email. Be like, hey, do you have this on a floppy disk somewhere? Maybe we could.
To who?
To who?
Exactly.
Yeah, you got me there.
I didn't edit that break.
No,
by the way.
no.
That was how. That
was
how
me thinking it. I got nothing. Hang on. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out who the production studio was for this.
Look, you go. You put your researcher hat on.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to go back to the sound design because we briefly went over it, like how they have those like classic 8-bit NES like video game sound design elements, like when Link with Link's sword, or like when like in battle moments and stuff like that.
Dick Entertainment.
Like, oh my god, that was so loud in my ear.
That's the guys that made the show. They got bought out by a company, so it's probably got lost in the transition. Sorry to interrupt your school of thought.
It's so okay. It's okay. But I was like, wait, what? Like just the sound design in general. Like, what were your thoughts outside of like? Obviously, it's really nice they incorporate those like game sounds in there. How did you feel? How like they use it? How they placed it? Would you have gone classic? Like, what's your?
I feel like that was classic. Like, I don't know if the sound effects were straight out of the game.
Sorry, when I mean classic, like literally, like find an actual sword sound effect. Like,
I see.
Classic.
Well, yeah. I think they did that for a lot of things. Like, I know I mentioned earlier, like the Foley artists were probably having a field day because, Link's battling something and there's items flying everywhere and just like very weird sort of like battle sequences in unorthodox sort of settings. So there is a lot of that. It feels really well done, but the timing of it, the pacing just feels clunky. Like it doesn't all chain together in a rhythmically pleasing way. It's like feels very jittery and stally and stop and start, but all the effects are there. And if you see something visual happen on screen and any contact being made, there's a sound effect for it. And sometimes it is that classic 8-bit stuff, but sometimes, it's just very sort of classic sound design, whatever Foley artists do to replicate the sound of what you're seeing on screen. Yeah. But I think it was well done in terms of like what they recorded and what the sound effects are, kind of like have those sound effects that appeal to gamers, but also just feels like a properly made cartoon from that time. But yeah, the rhythm of it just sort of felt weird. People are getting thrown all over the place in these like battle scenes, and they're hitting their bums on the ground and they're yelling out like screams or what like cries, and it's like it just doesn't flow super comfortably, but all the elements are there at least.
Right. I don't know. Like, how did you word it earlier? Did you say this might be the first like series with an orchestral soundtrack? Is that how you said it?
Yeah, I mentioned this would have been the first time that Legend of Zelda songs were heard with like in an orchestral sense, like in a recorded music sort of bigger budget medium. I'd like to check on that, but I don't think there was any other Legend of Zelda media outside of the games at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, what would it be like Zelda? Because I kind of want to go down this rabbit hole. I find that really interesting.
Like I don't know, like timeline of Legend of Zelda.
Timeline of Legend of Zelda soundtrack, I guess.
I don't even know about like soundtrack, but I don't know, because like sure we have the TV show that we're talking about. I don't think there were any like movies. Obviously, the video games were there. Was there like commercials or like toys or something, like especially maybe in Japan that was happening like around the release of the game? Because the game came out in trying to remember here. It was like NES era, so that's what, like mid 80s. So the TV show would have come out just a couple of years after that. I don't know if there would have been time to to develop anything.
Okay,
else.
so Matt, when was the game of Skyward Sword first released?
Well, that was on the Wii, right? Wii came out in 2006. I want to say Skyward Sword came out after Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess was also like a GameCube tie-in.
After 1989?
Skyward Sword was definitely, it was after 89.
Okay, so my research shows. I just want to make sure.
Okay, 2008 or something like that.
Skyward Sword, apparently, according to Google, Skyward Sword marked the first time a symphony was used to record the soundtrack of a Zelda game.
Okay, yeah.
So if it's the first time for a game, for sure, this is the first time for.
And that was just because of the limitations of older consoles, right? I guess with the Wii, you could have, not to say it was lossless audio, but actual audio embedded into the game, which is really cool. For something like a TV show, or if they were, I feel bad for not even knowing if there's any kind of Legend of Zelda movies. I know there's a notoriously bad Super Mario one. There's a notoriously okay Super Mario one that came out recently. But in terms of I'm just trying to think of non-game Zelda anythings. And I'm not too familiar.
Dude.
Yes?
No, there's no way this is real. There's no way this is real. There's no way this is real. I just typed in Legend of Zelda movie, and I'm seeing a teaser for 2025.
Oh, I did. Isn't Netflix making was it a series or a movie?
The Legend of Zelda, directed by Wes Ball.
Not familiar.
What is this?
Wesley's work.
A remake of The Legend of Zelda 1986. There's a 1986 Zelda video game. Okay, well, apparently there's a Zelda movie incoming, according to IMDb.
Well, that's exciting.
Is it?
I'll sit down and watch it, but, video game movies, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought.
So, just out of curiosity, doing some deep diving research, I found the Wikipedia page for list of Legend of Zelda media. So they got the timeline of games, other things like mangas and books and board games and stuff like that. Weirdly enough,
did the book have a soundtrack?
No, the book. It's not an audio book, man. Imagine finding it on Audible or something, and it's just the soundtrack.
The Zelda soundtrack.
But there have been a couple
by Matty Perry.
Yeah, exactly. Narrated by me, and it's just me holding my phone to a microphone playing the TV show. But yeah, so there are CDs of Legend of Zelda soundtracks to have come out, but it seems like the first time that an orchestrated symphony doing Zelda music came out was 1999. So that's 10 years after this TV show came out. Didn't seem like there was a way to get the music from the TV show, but I think that was the first time that something like that was heard.
So it was the first time. It was, and let me ask you this.
I'm listening.
I might be overhyping this, considering what you've seen and considering when it was made. Is this? I want a yes or a no, and then I want an opinion. Okay. Is this groundbreaking? Was this groundbreaking, Matt?
No. At the end.
I thought you were gonna say
I don't
yes.
think so. I think there was a lot of firsts to happen within the Zelda world, but at the end of the day, it was a TV show that aired for one season on, North American kids cartoon channels. It's a cash grab. I don't know. Zelda's, what do kids like? Zelda, let's make a TV show and try and grow the Zelda brand. It's what they did with Mario and Pokemon, and they had different degrees of popularity, but I don't know. This was just something was popular and they were trying to cross-platform, get people involved. But I think if you were a Zelda fan growing up playing the original games and you were a kid and the show came out and you were a kid, that's perfect. I'll watch that and I love it. But, it's kids' TV shows aren't really revolutionary. A lot of firsts.
I'm not saying, but obviously, I want to give, and I think I should have mentioned this earlier, but speaking of Zelda music and stuff like that, the composer Koji Kondo, one of the, I just want to highlight the works of Koji. I just find that as a composer, it's always been really really incredible to hear what he's made and how he approaches music and how he built a musical environment that's ultimately has its own identity, even though we can be oh, it's a kid's show. It was only the music in Zelda has its own identity. You hear it, you're like, oh, that sounds like it would be in Zelda. And I really think that this series, like the 1989 one, doesn't really necessarily contribute to that, because it's like reorchestrations of those like Zelda song classics mostly throughout. You have the odd like, oh, that sounds like it's just a medieval mystical piece, but I find that like altogether it has its own identity.
The music specific to this show, you're saying?
Like I guess just the music of Zelda.
If we zoom out a little bit and see music of Zelda as a whole, no doubt it has its own identity, and I think part of its identity is just how different it is from each other. It's not like you hear one song that you've never heard before and think, oh, that has to be a Zelda song. I think the beauty in the music is that I'm not sure how many composers are contributing to these songs or what their workflow is like. I definitely like the end product, but so many songs do sound different from each other, you know? And I think that just speaks to the world's building and how there's, you know, in every game, there's so many different places you can go, different climates, biomes, characters, races of people, you know, and their behaviors. And I think music sort of follows that, and the music helps strengthen a lot of their unique personalities as well. So I think a lot of the beauty in Legend of Zelda music isn't that all of their songs have a distinct Zelda-ism to it. I think it's the fact that it does sound so different, and it kind of just really helps shape the world of Hyrule, whether it be in a TV show or in, you know, a long line of video games across the decades. But
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I feel like I've hit all the like points on the music in Zelda. I guess we unless you have like any other big major things you want to discuss, like I would go to closing thoughts.
Yeah, I would too. I think we've covered at least how it is in the game, or sorry, in the show. Ganon has a theme, but I hate Ganon in this show, so I hate Ganon's theme in the show. But I think it's just a very musically dense show. Music does a lot.
Very musically dense. Yeah.
And the games are musically dense as well, which is why I was kind of surprised that with the new sort of Switch games, it was very minimal music. It was a bit atmospheric, but there isn't these big swelling fanfares or like big key themes like in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Like you're kind of walking around in silence a lot of the time, but the absence of music also adds to the atmosphere and the world building as well. So
absolutely.
But yeah, that's I think we sort of covered the bases, at least how it relates to the show. Like I mentioned, I think the music is one of my favorite parts of the show, and all the different ways they reorchestrated the main theme. And I don't have too much to add beyond what's been said about it between us.
I mean, on my end as well, I really just feel like it would have been because like you mentioned musical denseness of the show, and then like how when you play certain games, it's like part of the character building and world building is like the silence of it, the absence of music. Yeah. And one thing I've learned through like this podcast specifically is like absence of music can be just as good of a decision as putting in music. And this show was very like just audio dense because the music gets crushed by sound effects and narration and everything like we said before. And there's a lot of music. There's just a lot happening. It's like a very high energy cartoon. Is the other thing I wanted to like add. But like all together, it hits as a Zelda product, and it's not completely bad.
No.
It's actually quite good considering when it was made. I just like watching it as a 30-year-old. I'm like, yo.
I had the same thought. I'm like, I am not the core demographic of if I was
the core demographic.
Born in 1979 and I was 10 years old when this came out, I'd eat it up. But nope. I enjoy it, you know, and it's fun to sort of dissect.
You would eat it up at 10 years old. You would spit it out at 30. That sounds about right.
Yeah, exactly. But or if I watched it at 10, by the time I was 30, I'd be like, oh, you know. Then the nostalgia tinted shades would come on and be like, no, I swear this show was amazing. But
guys, it's not that bad. Change his channel.
Yeah, exactly. But seeing it for the first time at the age that I'm at, you know, I know it wasn't made for me back then and not made for me now, but still a fun little gem that I wasn't aware existed. So it's fun to sort of revisit that and sort of like actively watch it, look out for these, you know, audio things in the background. Because like I said, very easy to be distracted by the visuals and the voice acting.
It is a TV show after all, it's not just a musical piece.
Yeah, exactly. And they're trying to cram as much plot and exposition as they can in these 15-minute episodes as well. So, it doesn't have room to breathe. But thankfully, the music is very busy and kind of helps complement that pacing as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's everything for this episode. Matt, where can people find you if they want to check out your work and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at Nuclear Maddie on Instagram. Nuclear Sound is the name of my recording studio, which is in Toronto, but I'm here in Montreal doing a lot of production work for sort of independent singer-songwriters, things like that. If you want to hear what I've done before, my website is nuclearsound.ca. It's all artists that aren't me, but stuff I've helped co-write and produce that I'm very proud of. And I'm going to be releasing music later this year as a solo artist after a decade in the game. So that's all very exciting, but that's where you can
so excited for that. Yeah, everything Matt will send me the links, and everything will be linked in the description, so please go check that all out. Give it a follow, give it a like, whatever your social media things do nowadays, whatever, just go interact with it, please.
Appease the algorithm gods.
Yeah, please, the algorithm gods. So for myself, JaianMusic.com is my website, so go check out and find all my stuff over there. I've made a lot of Zelda covers in my day, so they're all available on Spotify. Just look up JaianMusic. If you're a fan of the podcast, subscribe to it. JaianMusic Notes. I talk about music and anime and my own covers and everything every week on the show, so you can go find me over there. Just look up JaianMusic Notes in your favorite podcatcher and give us a 5-star review. The show is sponsored, so go over to Leza.io and go check out all their plugins. They make really, really cool creative effects plugins, so please go check them out. They're really worth the time. And if you use code JaianMusic, you get 25% off. And of course, the artist for the podcast, GoPro a break. Thank you to him. So go follow him at GoPro. All of the links are in the description for that. So for myself, and actually, a big thank you to you, Matt. Like, this was a really fun time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot more than, well, not that I thought I would, but it's interesting to see what kind of...
I'm going to hate this, I'm going to hate this, I'm going to hate this, I'm going to hate this.
No, but it's interesting to see what kind of conversations can come out of, that are centered around a piece of media that you don't necessarily love or have an attachment to, but just discovered, but still a lot to get into. So, it's been fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're more than welcome to come back anytime.
Appreciate it.
If you have another Zelda-esque adventure that you want to discuss, here the castle's here, Matt. The castle's here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem. So for myself and Matt, this has been another episode of JaianMusic Notes, and we will see you in the next one. I will see you in the next one. Bye.